Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're pulling back the curtain on, well, a pretty intense and very public online dispute that's gone legal. Our source is this YouTube video transcript, open letter to CheezWhiz Boy. Quite the title, from a channel called Hot Lips, and it features someone called Legally Leslie.
Right. And our job today really is to kind of unpack this open letter, see how these online things can just escalate fast into, real-world legal trouble.
Exactly. Accusations, threats, court dates, it's all in there.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder, isn't it, how the digital world and legal accountability are really starting to merge.
Totally. So where does Leslie even start with this?
Well, she frames the beginning very clearly. She says, and this is pretty much a direct quote, "I had no idea who you were until you decided to come after me."
Okay, so she's putting the blame squarely on him, this nutty boy.
Yeah, exactly. She basically says all the time he spent obsessing over her, that's on you, man, not me.
Yeah.
Sets the stage, who initiated this whole thing.
Right, and then she gets into the type of communication, calling them, what was it? Threats wrapped in riddles.
Threats wrapped in riddles, which is fascinating.
It really is. Because, how do courts even deal with that? If it's not a direct threat, if it's ambiguous, does that help the guy? Or make it worse?
That's a great question. You might think being vague protects you, right? But courts often look at the context, the whole picture, and the victim's reasonable perception. So if the intent seems to be harassment or intimidation, that ambiguity, it can actually make it seem more insidious, more planned.
I see. So the vagueness isn't necessarily a shield.
Not always. And what's also really interesting here is how much Leslie focuses on his anonymity, or his apparent worry about losing it.
Yeah, she challenges him on that, doesn't she? Asks something like, if you're so confident, what are you hiding?
Exactly. Why is that anonymity so important to him if his actions are supposedly justified?
So why is anonymity such a big deal in these online fights?
Yeah.
And why does Leslie seem so sure it won't last for him?
Well, anonymity is often the key thing that makes people feel bold online, right? They think, hey, no consequences.
Sure, the keyboard warrior idea.
Precisely. But Leslie's pointing out that shield, it's not as strong as people think, especially now, because this isn't just an online spat anymore.
Right. It's gone legal.
It's gone legal. She says it flat out. You're in court now. You're a named defendant.
A named defendant. What does that actually mean for someone who is trying to stay hidden?
It means basically game over for anonymity in the legal sense. You're officially identified in court documents. These are usually public records. So your name, potentially other details, they're out there. It kicks off formal legal discovery. They can compel information. So yeah, hiding online, much, much harder once the courts get involved. The internet isn't the Wild West anymore, legally speaking.
Okay, so his identity is likely coming out. But it doesn't stop there, does it? Leslie mentions law enforcement.
That's a major escalation. She says a report on his letter is already with them.
And that they've seen enough to pass judgment about your state of mind. That sounds serious.
It is serious. It suggests the police reviewed it and thought, okay, this might cross a line, maybe into harassment, threats, something criminal, or at least deeply concerning behavior.
And she says they're watching you now, calls it a fact, not just a warning.
Right. And watching means they're likely allocating actual resources, monitoring his activity, potentially. It's not just a civil matter between two people anymore. It's on law enforcement's radar. Formal documentation exists.
Wow. Okay. So from online comments, maybe anonymous ones, to being formally named in court and now potentially monitored by police.
It's quite the progression.
Yeah. And Leslie really hammers home the consequences at the end, right?
She does. Her final line is pretty definitive. You made yourself a problem, and now you get to live in its consequences.
A very stark conclusion.
It really is. And this whole deep dive into Leslie's letter is just such a clear illustration, isn't it? The digital world isn't separate. Actions there, they have real, tangible, sometimes severe consequences back here in the real world, especially once the legal system steps in.
Definitely. It leaves you with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? In this world where everyone seems to value online anonymity, what does a case like this really show us?
Exactly. What does it teach us about where digital actions meet legal accountability? And how do those threats wrapped in riddles actually get interpreted when they land in a courtroom? What happens when that cloak of anonymity finally gets peeled away?
Lots to think about there. Something for you, the listener, to definitely mull over.